The black SUV skidded around the corner of Park Avenue, tires screaming against wet asphalt as it barreled toward the towering glass monument that housed Blackwood Industries. Inside, Eloise Martinez gripped the door handle so tightly her knuckles went white, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. "Lady, you said it was an emergency, but this is insane." The Uber driver's voice cracked as he swerved between two yellow cabs. "What kind of job interview requires— Just get me there alive!" Eloise shouted over the screech of brakes. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see the imposing 60-story building growing larger by the second. Her phone buzzed with yet another text from her landlord. Final notice: pay rent by 5 p.m. or face eviction. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about survival. The SUV lurched to a stop in front of the gleaming entrance, and Eloise threw a crumpled 20 at the driver before bolting into the rain. Her cheap umbrella turned inside out immediately, leaving her soaked to the bone in her only good interview outfit, a navy blazer she'd bought at a thrift store and black pants that had seen better days. "Wait," she called to the revolving door, but it had already swallowed the last group of suited executives. The massive lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of marble and money, making her feel smaller than an ant. "Excuse me, miss." A security guard approached, his expression skeptical as he took in her dripping appearance. "Are you here for the janitorial position?" "No, Eloise straightened her shoulders, mustering every ounce of dignity she possessed. "I have an interview with Mr. Franklin Blackwood for the nanny position." The guard's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Blackwood, are you sure you have the right—" "Eloise Martinez, 2 p.m. appointment." She pulled out her phone, showing him the confirmation email she'd read at least 50 times. "I'm here for his daughter." 20 minutes later, Eloise stood outside the corner office on the 50th floor, her hands shaking as she tried to smooth down her damp hair. The secretary, an elegant woman in her 50s, had given her a towel and a look of barely concealed pity. "He's finishing a conference call," the secretary whispered. "Fair warning, he's difficult on good days. Today is not a good day." Through the frosted glass, Eloise could hear a deep voice, clipped and authoritative, discussing quarterly projections with the cold precision of a surgeon. She closed her eyes and tried to channel her mother's voice. "Mia, when life knocks you down, you get back up and show it who's boss." The door opened. "Miss Martinez?" Eloise looked up and felt her breath catch. Franklin Blackwood stood in the doorway like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like it had been styled by someone who charged more per hour than she made in a week. His suit was charcoal gray and impeccably tailored, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds, and just as forbidding. "Mr. Blackwood." She stood, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me." He didn't shake her hand. Instead, he looked her up and down with the expression of someone who'd found a stray cat in his penthouse. "You're wet." "It's raining," she said, then immediately regretted the sarcasm. "I mean, yes, I got caught in the downpour. I'm sorry for my appearance." "Come in." He turned and walked into his office without waiting for her response. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, leather furniture that probably cost more than her car, and awards and photographs covering one entire wall. But what caught her attention was the small corner where a child's drawing hung among the corporate accolades, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow drawn in crayon. "Please sit." Franklin gestured to a chair across from his massive desk, then remained standing. It was clearly a power move, and it worked. From where she sat, he loomed over her like a corporate giant. "I've reviewed your resume," he began, his voice as warm as an Arctic wind. 3 years as a part-time babysitter, a degree in early childhood education from a state school, and a gap in employment for the past 4 months. Care to explain the gap? Eloise's cheeks burned. "I was laid off from my previous position at a daycare center. Budget cuts." "And the other positions you applied for?" "I didn't get them." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze despite the intimidation. "But I'm here now." "Yes, you are." He picked up a folder from his desk. "Tell me, Miss Martinez, What makes you think you're qualified to care for my daughter? She's not just any child, she's a Blackwood. She requires someone with discretion, class, experience with children of her social standing. Something hot and sharp twisted in Eloise's chest. Are you asking about my qualifications or my net worth? Franklin's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those storm gray eyes. I'm asking if you understand what you're signing up for. I understand that you have a little girl who needs someone to care about her, Eloise said, her voice steadier now. I understand that no amount of money can buy genuine affection or attention, and I understand that. The office door burst open with a bang that made both adults jump. Daddy! A whirlwind of golden curls and bright blue eyes launched herself across the room, her school uniform askew, her backpack trailing behind her like a comet's tail. She collided with Franklin's legs and wrapped her arms around his waist, nearly toppling him. Mia! Franklin's voice transformed completely, the ice melting into something warm and concerned. What are you doing here? Where's Mrs. Henderson? She's talking to your scary secretary lady, the little girl said, her voice muffled against his jacket. School got out early because of the storm, and I wanted to see you, and... She suddenly noticed Eloise. Oh, hi. Eloise felt her heart do a little flip. The child was absolutely beautiful, with her father's striking features softened by youth and animation. But it was her eyes that caught Eloise's attention, bright and curious, but with a hint of something that looked almost like loneliness. Hi there, Eloise said softly. You must be Mia. That's me. Mia disentangled herself from her father and bounced toward Eloise. Are you here to see Daddy about boring business stuff? Actually, I'm here to meet you, Eloise said, crouching down to be at eye level with the child. I'm Eloise. I was hoping we could be friends. Mia's eyes went wide. Really? Like real friends, not just because Daddy pays you? The innocence of the question hit Eloise like a physical blow. She glanced up at Franklin, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. Real friends, Eloise promised. The kind who like the same movies and share secrets and build blanket forts together. You know how to build blanket forts? Mia's voice rose to a squeak of excitement. I'm a blanket fort architect, Eloise said solemnly. I specialize in maximum coziness with structural integrity. Mia giggled, a sound like silver bells. What's structural, that word you said? It means they don't fall down when you sneeze. Mrs. Henderson's forts always fall down, Mia announced. She says I'm too wiggly. There's no such thing as too wiggly when you're building the perfect fort, Eloise said. Wiggly is part of the engineering process. Franklin cleared his throat. Mia, why don't you go with Mrs. Henderson to get some juice while I finish talking with Miss Martinez? But I want to talk to Eloise, Mia protested, then turned to Eloise with hopeful eyes. Will you still be here when I get back? Eloise looked at Franklin, who was studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I don't know, she said honestly. That's up to your daddy. Daddy? Mia turned to her father with the kind of pleading expression that had probably gotten her out of trouble more times than she could count. Can Eloise stay? Please? I really, really like her. Franklin was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between his daughter and Eloise. Finally, he sighed. Go get your juice, sweetheart. We'll talk about this later. After Mia left, the office fell into a silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity. Franklin returned to his position behind the desk, but this time he sat down, bringing them to eye level. She likes you, he said finally. I like her too, Eloise replied. She's amazing. She is. For just a moment, Franklin's expression softened, and Eloise caught a glimpse of the man beneath the corporate armor. She's also been through 3 nannies in the past year. What happened to them? Franklin's jaw tightened. They didn't understand that Mia isn't just a job. She's my daughter. He paused, seeming to search for words. She's everything. The raw emotion in his voice caught Eloise off guard. This wasn't the cold, calculating CEO she'd met 10 minutes ago. This was a father who was struggling to do right by his child. "How long has it been since her mother?" Eloise asked gently. 2 years. Franklin's voice was barely above a whisper. "Car accident? Mia was with me that day, thank God, but she still asks when Mommy's coming home sometimes." Eloise felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "I don't need your pity," Franklin said, the wall slamming back up. "I need someone who can take care of my daughter without complicating our lives." "And you think I'll complicate things?" He studied her for a long moment. "I think you're dangerous, Miss Martinez." "Dangerous?" Eloise nearly laughed. "I'm about to be evicted from my studio apartment. I'm hardly dangerous." "You made my daughter laugh," Franklin said quietly. "She hasn't laughed like that in months, and you did it in 5 minutes. Is that bad?" "It is if you leave." Franklin stood abruptly, walking to the window. "Mia gets attached quickly. She's already lost too much. I won't let her lose anyone else." Eloise stood too, something fierce and protective rising in her chest. "Then don't let me leave." Franklin turned, his eyes searching her face. "You don't understand what you're asking. This isn't just about babysitting. Mia needs stability, consistency, someone who won't run at the first sign of difficulty." "I don't run," Eloise said firmly. "I fight." "For what?" "For the people I care about." She took a step closer, her voice growing stronger. "I grew up with nothing, Mr. Blackwood. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, and she taught me that family isn't about blood or money. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard." Franklin stared at her, and she could see the internal battle playing out in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. 2 weeks, trial period. You'll work Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., weekends off unless there's an emergency. If you're late, careless, or give me any reason to doubt your commitment to Mia's welfare, you're gone immediately. Eloise's heart soared. "Thank you. You won't regret this." "I already regret it," Franklin muttered, but she caught the hint of something that might have been a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. As if summoned by some parental instinct, Mia came barreling back into the office, Mrs. Henderson trailing behind her with an apologetic expression. "So?" Mia demanded, looking between her father and Eloise. "Is she staying? Are we going to be friends?" Franklin looked down at his daughter, and for a moment, his entire face transformed. The love there was so pure and overwhelming that Eloise had to look away. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "Eloise is going to be your new nanny." Mia let out a shriek of joy that probably shattered glass in 3 neighboring buildings, then launched herself at Eloise, who caught her in a fierce hug. "This is the best day ever," Mia announced. "Can we build a fort now? Can we? Can we?" "Tomorrow," Eloise promised, glancing at Franklin over Mia's head. "I start tomorrow." Franklin nodded, but his expression had returned to its professional mask. "Mrs. Henderson will give you all the necessary information. Emergency contacts, schedules, dietary restrictions, everything you need to know." "Thank you," Eloise said, meaning it more than she'd ever meant anything in her life. As she followed Mrs. Henderson out of the office, Eloise heard Mia chattering excitedly to her father about all the things she wanted to do with her new friend. But when she glanced back, she saw Franklin standing at his window again, his shoulders rigid with tension. She had the job. She had a chance to start over, to build something good. So why did she have the feeling that the hardest part was just beginning? Eloise stood outside the imposing wrought iron gates of the Blackwood estate at 6:45 a.m., clutching a thermos of coffee she'd made with her last bit of grounds and staring up at what could only be described as a mansion. The GPS had led her through winding roads in the Hamptons, past manicured lawns and houses that belonged in architectural magazines. But nothing had prepared her for this. The estate stretched across what looked like acres of perfectly landscaped grounds, with a circular driveway leading to a house that seemed to have more windows than a department store. It was beautiful in that intimidating, old-money way that made her feel like she should be using the service entrance. "You've got this, Eloise," she muttered to herself, pressing the intercom button. "It's just a house, a really, really big house where really, really rich people live." "Good morning, Miss Martinez." The voice through the speaker was crisp and professional. "Please come up to the main entrance." The gates swung open with a mechanical hum, and Eloise walked up the curved driveway, her sensible flats clicking against the pristine stones. She'd spent her last $20 on a new blouse and had pressed her pants so many times they could probably stand up on their own. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, and the kind of posture that suggested military training or ballet, possibly both. "Miss Martinez, I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager," the woman said, extending a hand. "Mr. Blackwood had to leave early for a meeting, but he's left detailed instructions for your first day." "Thank you," Eloise said, shaking the offered hand. "I'm excited to get started." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Follow me. I'll show you around and brief you on the household schedule." The interior of the house was just as impressive as the exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. But as they walked through the rooms, Eloise began to notice the details that made it feel less like a showcase and more like a home. Family photos scattered on side tables, a pair of small sneakers abandoned by the stairs, and the lingering scent of someone's morning coffee. "The kitchen," Mrs. Chen announced, leading her into a room that was bigger than Eloise's entire apartment. "Mia's breakfast preferences are listed here, along with her dietary restrictions. She's allergic to nuts and doesn't care for eggs unless they're scrambled with cheese." Eloise nodded, taking notes on her phone. "What about lunch?" "She usually has lunch at school, but on weekends or sick days, she prefers simple foods: grilled cheese, soup, fruit." Mrs. Chen handed her a thick folder. "Everything you need to know is in here: emergency contacts, school schedule, after-school activities, bedtime routine." They continued the tour: living room, library, playroom, and finally up a grand staircase to the second floor. The hallway was lined with more family photos, and Eloise found herself slowing to look at them. Franklin and a beautiful blonde woman with Mia as a baby. Toddler photos of Mia covered in what looked like chocolate cake. Family vacations on beaches and ski slopes. "That's Mrs. Blackwood," Mrs. Chen said quietly, noticing her attention. "She was lovely. Mia has her mother's spirit." "She seems like she was an amazing woman," Eloise said. "She was. Mr. Blackwood, he hasn't been the same since the accident. He works too much, smiles too little." Mrs. Chen stopped outside a door painted pale purple with butterfly stickers spelling out MIA in glittery letters. "But he adores that little girl. She's the only thing that matters to him now." The door burst open before Mrs. Chen could knock. "Eloise!" Mia launched herself forward, still in her pajamas, pink with unicorns, her hair a tangle of golden curls. "You're here. You're really here. I thought maybe I dreamed you." "Good morning, sunshine," Eloise laughed, catching the enthusiastic hug. "I'm very real and I'm very excited to spend the day with you. I have so many things to show you." Mia grabbed her hand, tugging her into the bedroom. "This is my room. And this is Mr. Whiskers, my cat. Well, he's not real, but he's very important. And this is my art corner, and this is where I keep my books, and—" "Mia, slow down," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Let Miss Martinez breathe." "It's okay," Eloise said, genuinely charmed by the little girl's enthusiasm. "I love the grand tour. Your room is beautiful, Mia." And it was. The walls were painted a soft lavender, with white furniture and splashes of bright color everywhere. Artwork, stuffed animals, a reading nook with cushions and fairy lights. It was a little girl's dream room, but it also felt lived in and loved. "Daddy let me pick everything," Mia said proudly. "Mommy used to say that my room should be my special place where I can be myself." Eloise felt her heart squeeze. Your mommy was very wise. "I miss her," Mia said matter-of-factly. "But Daddy says she's watching over me from heaven and that makes me feel better." "I'm sure she is," Eloise said softly, "and I bet she's very proud of what a smart, kind little girl you've become." Mia beamed. "Come on, let's get breakfast. Mrs. Chen makes the best pancakes in the whole world." 2 hours later, Eloise was beginning to understand what Franklin had meant about Mia being everything. The little girl was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity. bouncing from activity to activity with the attention span of a butterfly. They'd had breakfast, pancakes with way too much syrup, played 3 different board games, started a puzzle, abandoned it for a tea party, and were now in the middle of what Mia called extreme dress-up. "You have to wear the crown," Mia insisted, placing a plastic tiara on Eloise's head. "Queens always wear crowns." "What makes you think I'm a queen?" Eloise asked, adjusting the feathered boa around her shoulders. "Because you're pretty and nice and you listen to me," Mia said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And you don't look at your phone when I'm talking." The casual observation hit Eloise harder than she expected. Did other people do that? "Sometimes," Mia said, rummaging through her costume box. "The other nannies were always busy with important stuff. But you're paying attention to me." "That's because you're the most important stuff," Eloise said, meaning it completely. Mia looked up at her with those bright blue eyes, so much like her father's, and smiled. "I really like you, Eloise." "I really like you too, sweetheart." They were in the middle of a very serious discussion about whether princesses could also be astronauts when Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Miss Martinez, Mr. Blackwood is on the phone. He'd like to speak with you." Eloise felt her stomach drop. It was only 10 a.m. What could have gone wrong already? "I'll be right back," she told Mia, who was now draping herself in what appeared to be a curtain from the playroom. Mrs. Chen handed her the cordless phone with an expression that gave nothing away. "Hello, Mr. Blackwood," Eloise said, trying to keep her voice steady. "How's everything going?" Franklin's voice was crisp and professional, but she could hear something underneath. Concern, maybe? "Great," she said honestly. "Mia's wonderful. We've had breakfast, played some games, and now we're having a very important discussion about career options for princesses." There was a pause. "Career options for princesses?" "It's a complex topic," Eloise said seriously. "There are a lot of considerations. Educational requirements, work-life balance, the practicalities of wearing a tiara in zero gravity." She heard something that might have been a chuckle. "I see. She's amazing, Mr. Blackwood. Curious, creative, funny. You should be very proud." "I am," he said quietly. "Listen, I'm going to be later than expected tonight. There's a dinner meeting I can't avoid. Would you be able to stay until 8? "Of course," Eloise said immediately. "Whatever you need." "Thank you. Mrs. Chen will order dinner for you and Mia. And Miss Martinez." "Yes?" "Thank you for paying attention to her. She needs that." The line went dead, and Eloise stared at the phone for a moment. There had been something in his voice, something vulnerable and grateful that made her chest tight. "Everything okay?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Yes," Eloise said, handing back the phone. "He's going to be late tonight." "That's becoming a pattern," Mrs. Chen said with a slight frown. "He didn't used to work such long hours." "Before the accident?" Mrs. Chen nodded. "He used to come home for dinner every night. Family time was sacred. But now," she shrugged. "Grief makes people do strange things." Eloise thought about that as she returned to Mia, who was now fully transformed into what appeared to be a space princess pirate hybrid. "Was that Daddy?" Mia asked, not looking up from her mirror as she adjusted her eye patch. "It was. He's going to be a little late tonight, but that means we get extra time together." "Good," Mia said firmly. "I like you better than his boring meetings." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activities. They built the promised blanket fort in the living room, with structural integrity that would have made an engineer proud, had a picnic lunch on the floor of said fort, did some actual educational activities. Mia was working on a project about butterflies for school, and spent an hour in the garden, where Mia showed off her knowledge of flowers and insisted on making a bouquet for the dinner table. By evening, Eloise was exhausted but happy. She'd forgotten how much energy children had, but she'd also forgotten how rewarding it was to see the world through their eyes. Mia approached everything with wonder and enthusiasm, and her laughter was infectious. They were in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on Mia's butterfly project when they heard the front door open. "Daddy!" Mia shrieked, abandoning her glue stick and racing toward the foyer. Eloise followed more slowly, suddenly nervous about seeing Franklin again. The professional, intimidating CEO from yesterday felt like a different person from the concerned father she'd spoken to on the phone. Franklin was standing in the entryway, his suit jacket slung over one arm, his tie loosened. He looked tired, but his face transformed when he saw Mia racing toward him. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, crouching down to catch her in a hug. "Did you have a good day?" "The best day ever," Mia announced. "Eloise and I built a fort and had a picnic and worked on my butterfly project, and she taught me about princess careers and we made you a bouquet." "A bouquet?" Franklin looked over Mia's head at Eloise, who was hovering in the doorway. "From the garden," Eloise explained. "Mia picked out all the flowers herself." "It's on the dinner table," Mia said proudly. "Come see, come see." Franklin allowed himself to be dragged into the dining room, where the small bouquet of garden flowers sat in a crystal vase, looking surprisingly elegant against the formal table setting. "It's beautiful," he said, and Eloise could hear the genuine emotion in his voice. "Thank you, Mia." "Eloise helped," Mia said generously. "She knows lots of things about flowers, and about princesses, and about making the best blanket forts in the whole world." "Does she now?" Franklin's eyes found Eloise's across the room. "It sounds like you two had quite an adventure." "We did," Eloise said. "Mia's been an amazing tour guide to the world of imagination." "Can Eloise eat dinner with us?" Mia asked suddenly. "Please. She's been here all day, and she should get to eat the flowers she helped pick." Franklin looked surprised. "I'm sure Miss Martinez has her own plans." "Actually," Eloise interrupted, "I don't have any plans. But I don't want to impose my—" "You're not imposing," Franklin said, and something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "If you'd like to stay, you're welcome to join us." "Really?" Mia bounced on her toes. "This is the best day ever." Dinner was complicated. On one hand, it was wonderful to watch Franklin with his daughter. He was attentive and engaged, asking about her day, helping her with her food, listening to her chatter about everything they'd done. This was the father Eloise had glimpsed beneath the corporate armor, warm, loving, present. But she also noticed the way he held himself, the careful distance he maintained from her, the way he seemed to be evaluating her responses to Mia's stories. It was like he was conducting a constant interview, looking for signs that she might not be what she seemed. "Tell Daddy about the princess astronaut thing," Mia said through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "We were discussing career diversity in the princess industry," Eloise said solemnly. "Mia made some excellent points about the importance of STEM education." "STEM education?" Franklin's eyebrows rose. "Well, if you're going to be a space princess, you need to understand rocket science," Mia said matter-of-factly. "And if you're going to be a doctor princess, you need to know about medicine. Eloise says princesses can be anything they want to be." Franklin's eyes met Eloise's across the table, and she saw something shift in his expression. That's very true. Mommy used to say that too," Mia added quietly. "She said I could be anything I wanted to be, as long as I was kind and worked hard." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Franklin's jaw tightened, and Eloise could see him struggling with something. "Your mommy was right," Eloise said gently. "And I think she'd be very proud of how kind and smart and creative you are." "Do you think she can see me from heaven?" Mia asked, her voice small. "I think," Eloise said carefully, "that love doesn't end just because someone isn't here anymore. I think your mommy's love is still with you, in all the things she taught you and all the ways she helped make you who you are." Mia nodded seriously. "That's what Daddy says too." Franklin cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, it's getting late. Time to start thinking about bed." "Ah, but I want to show Eloise my room," Mia protested. "She saw your room this morning," Franklin reminded her. "But not my nighttime room. It's different at night because of the starlights." Eloise looked at Franklin. "I could help with bedtime if you'd like. Get her settled." Franklin hesitated. "You've been here all day. You must be tired." "I'm fine," Eloise said, And it was true. She was tired, but she was also reluctant to leave this warm, complicated family dynamic. Besides, I'm curious about the starlights. 20 minutes later, Eloise found herself sitting on the edge of Mia's bed, reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar, while tiny LED stars twinkled on the ceiling above them. Mia was clean and in fresh pajamas, her hair brushed and shining, looking like an angel. "This is my favorite book," Mia said sleepily. "Mommy used to read it to me every night." "It's a wonderful book," Eloise said softly. "All about growing and changing and becoming something beautiful." "Like me," Mia said with a yawn. "Daddy says I'm growing up to be beautiful like Mommy." "I think you're growing up to be beautiful like you," Eloise said, tucking the covers around her. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart." "Eloise?" Mia's voice was sleepy but serious. "Yeah? Will you come back tomorrow?" Eloise's heart squeezed. "I'll be here bright and early." "Promise?" "Promise." Mia smiled and closed her eyes, her breathing evening out almost immediately. Eloise sat there for a moment watching her sleep, feeling something fierce and protective settle in her chest. This little girl had already been through so much loss. She deserved stability, love, someone who would show up consistently. She turned off the bedside lamp and tiptoed out of the room, pulling the door almost closed behind her. Franklin was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "She's asleep," Eloise said quietly. "Thank you," he said. "For today. For what you said at dinner about her mother." "It's what I believe," Eloise said. "Love doesn't end." Franklin was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim hallway light. "She's never asked a nanny to stay for dinner before. She's never had a nanny who understood about princess careers before," Eloise said lightly. "Is that what it was?" Franklin asked, and there was something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could have brushed off her questions, redirected her to something easier. Most people would have. But you took her seriously. You treated her ideas like they mattered." "They do matter," Eloise said simply. "She matters." Franklin stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with something. Finally, he spoke. "I haven't seen her this happy in a long time," he said quietly. "Not since her mother died." Eloise finished gently. He nodded. "I know it's only been one day, but she's different with you. Lighter. More like herself." "She's an amazing kid," Eloise said. "She just needs someone to see that." "And you do. See that?" "Of course I do. How could I not?" Franklin looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm not sure I know how to do this," he said finally. "Do what?" "Trust someone else with her happiness." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. The other nannies were competent, professional, but they were just doing a job. "You're..." "What?" "You're dangerous," he said, echoing his words from the day before. "Because you actually care." Eloise felt her heart skip. "Is that bad?" "It's terrifying," Franklin said honestly. "Because if you leave..." "I won't leave," Eloise said firmly. "Not unless you fire me." "People leave," Franklin said quietly. "People always leave, one way or another." The pain in his voice was so raw that Eloise had to fight the urge to reach out to him. Instead, she kept her voice steady and sure. "I'm not going anywhere, Franklin. Mia needs consistency and I need this job. We're going to figure this out together." He stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the war between hope and fear playing out in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "We'll try." "We'll try," Eloise agreed. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Eloise couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted today. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about this little girl who had claimed a piece of her heart, and about the man who was trying so hard to protect his daughter from any more pain. She was in dangerous territory, she knew that. But as she drove home through the quiet streets, She couldn't bring herself to care. Some things were worth the risk. 3 weeks into the job, Eloise thought she had everything figured out. Mia's morning routine, Franklin's coffee preferences, the delicate dance of being professional while genuinely caring. She was wrong. It started with the phone call that shattered their Tuesday morning peace. "Miss Martinez?" Mrs. Chen's voice was tight with worry. "There's been an incident at Mia's school. Food allergy reaction. They're taking her to Presbyterian Hospital." The world tilted. Eloise's coffee mug crashed to the kitchen floor as she grabbed her keys. "How bad? Is she?" "Conscious, but they need a parent or guardian immediately." 20 minutes later, Eloise burst through the emergency room doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found Mia on a hospital bed, looking small and pale against the white sheets, an IV in her tiny arm. "Eloise." Mia's voice was hoarse but relieved. "You came." "Of course I came, baby." Eloise rushed to her side, smoothing back her hair. "How are you feeling?" "Scary," Mia whispered. "My throat felt funny, and I couldn't breathe good." "But you're okay now," Eloise said, fighting back tears. "The doctors took good care of you." "Where's Daddy?" Before Eloise could answer, Franklin exploded through the curtains like a man possessed. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and there was pure terror in his eyes. "Mia." He was at her bedside in 2 strides, his hands trembling as he cupped her face. "Baby, are you okay? What happened?" "Daddy." Mia reached for him with her free arm. "I'm okay now. Eloise came, and the doctors made me feel better." Franklin's eyes found Eloise over Mia's head, and the gratitude there was overwhelming. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Dr. Peterson, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood? I'm glad you're here." Mia had a severe allergic reaction to nuts in a classroom snack. Fortunately, the school acted quickly with her EpiPen, and Miss Martinez was here within minutes. "She's going to be fine?" Franklin's voice cracked slightly. "Completely fine. We're keeping her for observation, but she can go home this evening." As the doctor left, Franklin sank into the chair beside Mia's bed, his hands still shaking. Eloise watched him struggle to maintain composure, saw the moment his corporate mask finally cracked. "I should have been here," he whispered. "I was in a meeting about quarterly projections while my daughter—" "You're here now," Eloise said softly. "That's what matters." "No, it's not." Franklin's voice was raw. "You were here. You dropped everything and ran to be with her while I was talking about profit margins." "Franklin, don't." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Getting comfortable, letting someone else care about her, and then when she really needed me. She needed both of us," Eloise said firmly, "and we were both here for her." Franklin turned, his eyes blazing. "You shouldn't have had to be. She's my responsibility. My daughter. My job to protect her." "And you can't be everywhere at once," Eloise shot back, her own emotions boiling over. "You can't control everything, Franklin. Accidents happen. People get hurt. That doesn't make you a bad father. Doesn't it?" His laugh was bitter. "I couldn't protect her mother. I can't even keep my 7-year-old safe at school." The pain in his voice hit Eloise like a physical blow. She looked at Mia, who had fallen asleep holding her father's hand, then back at Franklin. "Can we talk outside?" she said quietly. In the hallway, away from Mia's sleeping form, Franklin leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have taken that out on you. You probably saved her life today." "I did what anyone would do," Eloise said. "What you would have done if you were there. But I wasn't there." Franklin opened his eyes, and she saw the self-loathing in them. "Just like I wasn't there when Sarah's car skidded on black ice. I'm always too late." Eloise stepped closer, her heart breaking for him. "Franklin, you can't live your life trying to prevent every possible tragedy. You'll drive yourself crazy." "Maybe I already have." He ran his hands through his hair. Do you know what I was thinking when Mrs. Chen called? Not about Mia's breathing or her fear. I was thinking about how I couldn't lose her too. How selfish is that? It's human, Eloise said gently. It's love. Franklin looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. You called me Franklin. What? Earlier, you called me Franklin, not Mr. Blackwood. Eloise felt heat creep up her neck. I'm sorry, I was upset and... Don't apologize. His voice was softer now. I like it. I like a lot of things about you that I shouldn't. The air between them suddenly felt charged, dangerous. Eloise was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way Franklin was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Franklin, she whispered, and this time it was intentional. This is complicated, he said, but he didn't step away. Everything worthwhile is complicated. Eloise, Daddy? Mia's sleepy voice called from the room. Where did you go? The spell broke. Franklin stepped back, the walls slamming back into place. We should go back in, he said, his voice carefully neutral. But as they returned to Mia's bedside, Eloise caught him looking at her with an expression that made her pulse race. Something had changed between them in that hallway, something that couldn't be undone. Later that evening, after they'd brought Mia home and settled her in bed with extra stories and promises to stay close, Franklin found Eloise in the kitchen, cleaning up the dinner dishes. You don't have to do that, he said. I don't mind. She continued washing, needing something to do with her hands. How is she? Asleep. Finally. Franklin moved to stand beside her at the sink. Thank you. For today. For everything. You don't need to thank me for caring about her. That's just it, Franklin said quietly. I do need to thank you because caring about her the way you do, and it's not part of your job description. Eloise turned to face him, her heart hammering. Maybe it should be. Eloise. Her name was a warning and a prayer. I know this is complicated, she said. I know you're my boss, and I know you're still grieving, and I know there are a million reasons why this is a terrible idea. Then why? Because I can't help it. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I can't help caring about her, about you, about this family that's trying so hard to heal. Franklin stared at her, his jaw working. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly. Eloise stepped closer, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I understand that you're terrified of letting anyone get close because you think it means losing control. I understand that you work 18-hour days because it's easier than coming home to a house full of memories. And I understand that you're attracted to me, even though you wish you weren't. Eloise, I'm right, aren't I? Franklin's composure finally cracked. Yes, he said roughly. God help me, yes. You're right about all of it. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. So what do we do about it? Eloise asked. Nothing, Franklin said, but his eyes were saying something entirely different. We do nothing. We maintain professional boundaries. We protect Mia from any more instability. And what about protecting ourselves? From what? From missing out on something real because we're too scared to try. Franklin took a step closer, his eyes dark with conflict. You think this is real? I think, Eloise said carefully, that you haven't looked at another woman since your wife died. I think Mia lights up when we're all together, and I think you're more alive when you stop trying to control everything. You're dangerous, Franklin said for the third time since they'd met, but now it sounded less like an accusation and more like a confession. So are you, Eloise whispered. They were close enough now that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, could smell his cologne and the lingering scent of hospital antiseptic. Close enough that when he raised his hand to cup her cheek, she felt her breath catch. This could destroy everything, he said. Or it could save everything. Franklin stared at her for a long moment, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Then, just as she thought he might kiss her, he stepped back. I need time, he said. I need to think. Eloise nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. I understand. Do you? Franklin's smile was sad. Because I'm not sure I understand anything anymore. As Eloise gathered her things to leave, she could feel Franklin watching her from the kitchen doorway. At the front door, she turned back. Franklin? Yeah? Mia's lucky to have you. Don't let guilt make you forget that. After she left, Franklin stood in his empty kitchen, touching his cheek where her hand had briefly rested against his when she'd said goodbye. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to not be alone. Upstairs, Mia called out for water and Franklin went to her as he always did. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, he didn't feel like he was carrying the weight of the world by himself. And that terrified him almost as much as it gave him hope. Franklin stared at the divorce papers on his desk for the 100th time that week, his lawyer's words echoing in his mind. Sarah's life insurance policy has a clause. If you remarry within 3 years, the trust fund for Mia gets significantly reduced. It had been 5 days since the hospital, 5 days since that moment in the kitchen when he'd almost kissed Eloise. 5 days of pretending everything was normal while his world shifted beneath his feet. A knock on his office door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Come in. Eloise stepped through the door, and Franklin's breath caught. She was wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders. Professional, but beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. Mia forgot her science project, she said, holding up a colorful poster about butterflies. She's convinced she'll fail 4th grade if she doesn't have it for the presentation. 4th grade? Franklin couldn't help but smile. She's in 2nd grade. I tried to explain that, but apparently the stakes are life and death. Eloise's eyes sparkled with humor. She's very dramatic. She gets that from her mother, Franklin said softly, then caught himself. He'd been doing that more lately, mentioning Sarah without the sharp pang of guilt that usually followed. Franklin? Eloise stepped closer to his desk. Are you okay? You've seemed distant this week. He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something crack open in his chest. She was worried about him. This woman who owed him nothing but professional courtesy was genuinely concerned about his well-being. Can you sit down? He asked. There's something I need to tell you. Eloise settled into the chair across from his desk, her brow furrowed with concern. Is this about what happened between us? Because if you're uncomfortable... It's about Sarah's will, Franklin interrupted. There's a clause I didn't mention before. He explained about the trust fund, watching Eloise's face carefully. Her expression cycled through confusion, understanding, and finally, something that looked like hurt. So you're telling me this because... Her voice was carefully neutral. Because I need you to understand why this can't happen between us, Franklin said, hating himself for the words. Mia's financial security is more important than whatever this is. Eloise stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Whatever this is? Eloise. No, I get it. Her voice was sharp now, professional mask sliding into place. Your wife was smart to protect Mia from future gold diggers. Very thorough planning. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Eloise's eyes flashed. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you think I'm some opportunist who's been playing the long game with your daughter to get to your money. Franklin shot to his feet. That's not true, and you know it. Do I? Eloise crossed her arms. Because you seem pretty convinced that any feelings between us are just a convenient complication that can be solved with a legal document. The money isn't the real issue, Franklin said desperately. It's what it represents. Sarah's last wishes, her protection for Mia. If I ignore that, then you're choosing a dead woman's fears over a living chance at happiness, Eloise said quietly. The words hit Franklin like a physical blow. Don't. Don't what? Tell you the truth? Eloise stepped around the desk, getting closer. Your wife loved you and Mia. But she's gone, Franklin. She's been gone for 2 years. And you're still living your life according to her rules. They're not rules, they're a cage, Eloise said firmly, and you're using them to keep yourself locked away from anything that might hurt you again. Franklin stared at her, his jaw working. You think I want to feel this way? You think I chose to fall in love with my daughter's nanny? The words hung in the air between them, raw and unintended. Eloise's eyes went wide. You're in love with me? She whispered. Franklin closed his eyes, his hands clenched into fists. I didn't mean to say that. But you did say it. Yes, he said roughly. God help me, yes. I'm in love with you and it's tearing me apart because I can't do anything about it. Eloise moved closer, her voice soft. Why can't you? Because I failed Sarah. I failed to protect her, failed to save her, and now she's gone. Franklin's voice broke. I can't fail Mia too. I can't risk her security for my own selfish wants. And what if I told you that loving me wouldn't be failing her? Eloise reached up to cup his face. What if I told you that the money doesn't matter to me, that I'd sign any prenup or agreement you wanted? Franklin leaned into her touch despite himself. You'd do that? I'd do anything for you and Mia, Eloise said simply. Because I love you too. Franklin's eyes snapped open. Eloise, I love you, she repeated, stronger now. I love your daughter. I love the way you make coffee at exactly 6:47 every morning, and how you always double-check the locks before bed. I love that you still wear your wedding ring because you're not ready to let go, and I don't need you to be. You don't understand what you're saying? I understand that you're afraid, Eloise interrupted. I understand that loving someone new feels like betraying Sarah's memory. But Franklin, what if it doesn't have to? Before he could respond, the office door burst open. Daddy, Eloise! Mia bounded in, her face bright with excitement. I got an A+ on my butterfly presentation, Mrs. Patterson said it was the best in the whole class. Franklin and Eloise jumped apart, but not before Mia's sharp eyes caught the tension in the room. Why do you both look sad? Mia asked, her excitement dimming. Did something happen? Franklin knelt down to her level, forcing a smile. Nothing happened, sweetheart. We're so proud of your A+. But Mia was too smart to be fooled. She looked between them with the uncanny intuition of a child who'd learned to read adult emotions far too early. Are you fighting because of me? She asked in a small voice. What? Eloise dropped to her knees beside Franklin. Mia, no. Why would you think that? Because grown-ups always fight about kids, Mia said matter-of-factly. Tommy's parents got divorced because they fought about him all the time. Franklin felt like he'd been punched. Mia, sweetheart, Eloise and I aren't fighting about you. Then why do you look like you're gonna cry? Eloise glanced at Franklin, then made a decision. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings that are hard to explain. What kind of feelings? The kind where you care about someone very much, but you're not sure if it's the right thing to do, Eloise said carefully. Mia processed this with the seriousness of a judge. Do you mean love feelings? Franklin's breath caught. Mia, because I think you should have love feelings for each other, Mia announced. You make Daddy smile, and you make me happy, and Mommy always said that love makes families bigger, not smaller. The innocent wisdom hit Franklin like lightning. She said that? Uh-huh. When Grandma died, I was sad, and Mommy said that loving people doesn't use up love. It makes more love. Like magic. Franklin stared at his daughter, this small person who somehow understood things he'd been too afraid to see. Mia, what would you think if Daddy and Eloise had love feelings for each other? Mia's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Like really, really? If it were okay with you, Eloise said softly. It's more than okay. Mia threw her arms around both of them. It's the best thing ever. Can we be a real family? Can Eloise live with us? Can I call her Mama Eloise? Franklin looked at Eloise over Mia's head, seeing his own emotions reflected in her tear-bright eyes. What do you think? He asked quietly. Are you ready to be part of this crazy family? I've been part of this family since day one, Eloise said. I was just waiting for you to realize it. Franklin cupped her face with his free hand. Mia still wrapped around them both. I love you, he said, the words coming easier now. I love you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. I love you too, Eloise whispered. All of you. And finally, after weeks of almost kisses and almosts and what-ifs, Franklin kissed her. It was soft and sweet, and tasted like coming home, with Mia giggling between them and the late afternoon sun streaming through the office windows. When they broke apart, Mia looked between them with satisfaction. Now can we go get ice cream? This feels like an ice cream moment. Franklin laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. You know what? This definitely feels like an ice cream moment. As they walked out of the office together, Mia skipping between them and chattering about wedding plans and whether they could get a puppy now that they were going to be a real family, Franklin realized something profound. He wasn't betraying Sarah's memory by loving again. He was honoring it. Because Sarah had taught him how to love completely, fearlessly, and that love didn't end when someone died. It just grew bigger, making room for new people and new possibilities. And for the first time since he'd lost her, Franklin felt like he could breathe again. 6 months later, Eloise stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, her hands trembling as she smoothed down the simple ivory dress she'd chosen. It wasn't the elaborate gown most Blackwood brides probably wore, but it was perfect for her. Elegant, comfortable, and exactly what she'd dreamed of as a little girl. You look like a princess, Mia announced from her perch on the velvet chair, resplendent in her flower girl dress of pale pink tulle. The most beautiful princess in the whole world. Thank you, sweetheart. Eloise turned to face her soon-to-be stepdaughter, her heart swelling with love. Are you ready to walk down that aisle with me? I've been ready forever, Mia said solemnly. I've been practicing my flower petal throwing for weeks. Mrs. Chen says I'm a natural. A soft knock interrupted them. Come in, Eloise called. Mrs. Chen entered, followed by a woman Eloise had never expected to see today, Franklin's mother-in-law, Margaret Whitman, Sarah's mother. Mrs. Whitman, Eloise said, surprised but genuinely pleased. I didn't know you were coming. The elegant older woman smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I wouldn't miss this day. May I have a moment alone with you, dear? Mia and Mrs. Chen discreetly stepped outside, leaving the two women alone. I wanted to give you something, Margaret said, pulling a small velvet box from her purse. These were Sarah's pearl earrings. She wore them on her wedding day. Eloise's breath caught. Mrs. Whitman, I couldn't… Please, Margaret interrupted gently. Sarah would have wanted you to have them. She would have loved you, Eloise. And she would have been so grateful that you brought joy back into her family's life. With shaking hands, Eloise put on the pearls, feeling the weight of tradition and blessing. Thank you. This means everything to me. You've given my granddaughter a mother's love again, Margaret said, embracing her. And you've given Franklin permission to live again. Sarah's greatest wish was for them to be happy. You've made that wish come true. Through the window they could see guests gathering in the garden below, a small, intimate gathering of family and close friends under the ancient oak tree where Franklin had proposed 3 months ago. Are you nervous? Margaret asked. Terrified, Eloise admitted, but in the best possible way. Another knock, and this time it was Franklin's business partner, David, looking uncharacteristically emotional. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here who wants to see you before the ceremony. He stepped aside, and Eloise's mother, Carmen Rodriguez, appeared in the doorway. Mija, Carmen whispered, her face radiant with pride. Mama! Eloise flew into her mother's arms, tears streaming down her face. You made it. Did you think I would miss my daughter's wedding? Carmen pulled back to study her face. You look beautiful, mi amor. Happy. I am happy, Mama. So happy it scares me sometimes. Good, Carmen said firmly. That's how love should feel. Like the best kind of fear, the kind that makes you brave. Mrs. Chen reappeared with Mia, who was practically vibrating with excitement. It's time, she announced. The ceremony was small, but perfect. As Eloise walked down the aisle with Mia beside her, both of them scattering rose petals, she saw Franklin waiting under the oak tree in his dark suit, his face transformed with joy and wonder. He'd removed his wedding ring the night he proposed not because he was forgetting Sarah, but because he was ready to make new memories. The ring now hung on a chain around Mia's neck, a symbol of the love that had brought them all together. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Eloise barely heard the traditional words. She was lost in Franklin's eyes, in the way he looked at her like she was his miracle. When it came time for vows, Franklin went first. "Eloise," he said, his voice strong despite the emotion. "You came into our lives like a force of nature, turning our carefully ordered world upside down in the best possible way. You taught me that loving someone new doesn't diminish the love I had before. It multiplies it. You showed Mia that families can grow and change and still be strong. You gave us both permission to hope again." He paused, his voice catching. "I promise to love you with the same intensity that you love us. I promise to trust in what we're building together. And I promise to always remember that the best things in life are worth fighting for." Eloise wiped away tears as she began her own vows. "Franklin, I came to your office looking for a job, and I found a home. I found a little girl who needed someone to believe in princess astronauts and build blanket forts with structural integrity." The small crowd chuckled. "And I found a man who was so busy protecting his heart that he forgot it was meant to be shared." She looked down at Mia, who was beaming up at them both. "Mia, you taught me that love doesn't replace love. It adds to it. You've made me braver, sillier, and more myself than I've ever been." Turning back to Franklin, she concluded, "I promise to love you both with everything I have. I promise to show up every day, in all the ways that matter. And I promise that our family will always have room to grow. By the power vested in me," the minister said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Franklin cupped Eloise's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her happy tears. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood. I love you too, Mr. Blackwood." Their kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, while Mia cheered and tossed the remaining flower petals into the air like confetti. The reception was held in the garden with string lights twinkling overhead and jazz music floating through the evening air. Eloise watched Franklin dance with Mia, spinning her around while she giggled with pure joy and felt her heart might burst from happiness. "May I cut in?" she asked, and Franklin swept her into his arms as Mia ran off to find cake. "No regrets?" he murmured as they swayed together. "Only one," Eloise said seriously. Franklin's face clouded with concern. "What?" "I regret that it took us so long to get here," she said with a smile. "But then again, the best things are worth waiting for." "Speaking of waiting," Franklin said, pulling back to look at her, "I have a wedding gift for you." "Franklin, we agreed no gifts." "This is different." He led her to a quiet corner of the garden where an easel stood covered with a white cloth. "This is from all of us." He pulled away the cloth to reveal a beautiful oil painting of the three of them, sitting in their famous blanket fort, laughing and surrounded by books and stuffed animals. In the corner, painted in delicate script, were the words, "The Martinez Blackwood family, where love makes room for more." "Oh my God," Eloise breathed. "It's perfect." "Mia insisted on commissioning it," Franklin said. "She said we needed a family portrait for our new beginning." As if summoned, Mia appeared at their side, chocolate cake smeared on her cheek and her flower crown slightly askew. "Do you like it, Mama Eloise?" she asked eagerly. The title still made Eloise's heart skip. "I love it, baby. Just like I love you. And I love you. And Daddy loves you. And now we're all together forever and ever," Mia said with satisfaction. "Forever and ever," Franklin agreed, wrapping his arms around both his girls. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Mia had finally fallen asleep in her room, still wearing her flower crown because it was too special to take off, Franklin and Eloise sat on their bedroom balcony, watching the stars. "So," Franklin said, playing with her wedding ring. How does it feel to be a Blackwood? It feels like coming home, Eloise said honestly, but also like the beginning of an adventure. Any particular adventure you have in mind? Eloise smiled mysteriously. Well, Mia's been asking about baby brothers or sisters. Franklin nearly choked on his champagne. Has she now? She has very specific plans. Apparently she needs at least 2 siblings to properly staff her princess kingdom. 2? Franklin laughed. She doesn't dream small, does she? She gets that from her father, Eloise said, snuggling closer to him. The man who convinced a broke nanny to marry a billionaire CEO. As I recall, the nanny did most of the convincing, Franklin said, pressing a kiss to her temple. I was just smart enough to listen. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below them. The past year had been a whirlwind of legal meetings to restructure Mia's trust fund, family therapy sessions to help them all adjust to their new dynamic, and countless small moments of joy as they learned to be a family. Franklin? Eloise said softly. Thank you. For what? For taking a chance on us, for letting me love you both, for building something beautiful out of something broken. Franklin turned to face her fully, his eyes serious in the moonlight. Eloise, you didn't just take a chance on us, you saved us, both of us. We were drowning in our grief and fear, and you threw us a lifeline. We saved each other, Eloise corrected. That's what families do. Is that your professional opinion, Mrs. Blackwood? That's my personal guarantee, Mr. Blackwood. Franklin kissed her then, slow and deep and full of all the love they'd found in the most unexpected place. When they broke apart, Eloise rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. What are you thinking about? Franklin asked. Just this, Eloise said. This moment, this life. How sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about giving you exactly what you need when you least expect it. You mean when a broke nanny crashes into a billionaire's life during a fake emergency and ends up stealing his heart? Something like that, Eloise laughed. Though technically I think your daughter was the one who did the real matchmaking. Mia definitely has a future in relationship counseling, Franklin agreed, or possibly hostage negotiation. From down the hall they heard a small voice call out, Mama Eloise? Daddy? Can I sleep with you? I had a happy dream and I want to tell you about it. Franklin and Eloise looked at each other and burst into laughter. Welcome to married life with a 7-year-old, Franklin said, standing and extending his hand to his wife. Best life ever, Eloise said, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. Together they went to collect their daughter, and as they settled into the big bed with Mia between them, listening to her animated description of a dream involving flying unicorns and ice cream mountains, Eloise realized that this was what happy ending really meant. Not a destination, but a beginning. Not perfection, but love in all its messy, complicated, beautiful glory. And as Franklin's hand found hers across Mia's sleeping form, their wedding rings catching the moonlight streaming through the window, Eloise knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. The end.